I used to think trains were old-fashioned,
Clunky. Slow.
a relic of a world that no longer had time to savor a moment. But there I was, staring out the wide observation window of the lounge car, watching the world roll past like a movie no one was narrating. The desert outside was peach and gold, the sky a watercolor smear, and I felt something I hadn't in months: stillness. The train had left Chicago the night before, bound for the West Coast. Somewhere in the blur of ticket confirmations and nervous packing, I decided to buy the upgrade, a private roomette. Just for me. After 20 years of sleeping beside someone who eventually forgot I had a name, I needed the silence, more than I needed legroom. I didn't know he'd be on the train. Not until I turned around and saw him standing there, duffel bag slung over one shoulder, hair longer than the last time I'd seen him, and that same crooked grin he used to get as a teenager when he was trying to act casual but had done something insane. "Hey," he said, breathless, like he'd just run to catch the car before it detached. My voice caught. "Liam? What are you?" He held up a second ticket. "Thought you might need a co-pilot." There were so many things I wanted to say. This was supposed to be my time. You can't just drop into my solitude like a surprise guest star. But none of those words made it past my lips. Instead, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because something in me didn't know how else to respond to kindness that showed up without a warning. "You hate trains," I said. "Yeah," he shrugged. "But I hated seeing you pack like you were running away even more." We rode in silence for a while after that, back in the roomette. Two opposing benches. One wide window. A table between us like a border neither of us was sure we wanted to cross. It had been nearly a year since the divorce. His dad, my ex, had found someone younger, simpler, someone who didn't ask where his heart had gone while he was out golfing on Saturdays. But Liam had stayed in touch. Always. Even though we shared no blood, he'd insisted I was still family. And somehow those messages, short, random check-ins, became the only thing I looked forward to some days. Now he was here, across from me, the sound of the rails humming underneath our feet, the desert giving way to low hills and shadows. "Why now?" I asked.
He looked at me.
Really looked. And I was reminded that he wasn't 17 anymore. He was 23. A man. And somehow, still that boy who used to call me at midnight during college finals because no one calms me down like you do. "Because you never ask for help," he said softly. And I figured maybe you wouldn't have to if someone just showed up. I blinked fast. The landscape outside blurred, or maybe it was my vision. "This was supposed to be my way of letting go," I whispered. "Maybe I'm not here to stop that," he said. "Maybe I'm here to help you do it right." That night, the train rumbled into mountain country. The air outside the window turned sharp and blue. The moonlight reflected off snow patches on distant peaks. In our roomette, Liam had stretched his long legs out, a paperback resting on his stomach. I sat curled against the window, wrapped in a shawl I hadn't worn since the last anniversary I pretended to enjoy. "Do you remember that summer in Tahoe?" he asked, eyes still on the ceiling. I turned. "The one with the rainstorm?" He nodded. "We built that ridiculous pillow fort in the hotel room and pretended it was a spaceship." I smiled. "You were obsessed with sci-fi back then." He tilted his head toward me. "I wasn't pretending we were in space. I just liked being in a room with you." I blinked. "You were 10. Doesn't mean it wasn't true." Something inside me fluttered. That uncomfortable warmth that comes when someone says something too kind, too close. And you're not sure you're strong enough to believe it. "You were the only real calm in that house," he added.
I didn't know what to say to that. So I said nothing.
The train rocked gently, metal wheels kissing track beneath us. The silence between us wasn't awkward, just full, like it had weight. Later, after the porter came by to pull the two benches into beds, we faced opposite sides of the roomette, curtains pulled closed but feet only inches apart. "Good night, Liam," I murmured. "Night," he said. Then after a pause, "You looked happy today. Like the version of you from when I first met you." I let the words sink in like a bomb I didn't know I needed. And in the rhythm of steel and speed in space, I slept deeper than I had in years. The second day began with the scent of brewed coffee and pine slipping through the narrow gap in our window. Somewhere in Colorado, the world outside was still draped in morning fog, like it, too, wasn't quite ready to be seen. I sat cross-legged on my bed, knees tucked under my borrowed train blanket, watching Liam sleep on the opposite bench. His arm was slung over his eyes, hair tousled, mouth barely parted, completely unguarded. And for a moment I envied his ease. He stirred, then blinked into the early light, finding me already awake. "Creepy," he murmured, voice still gravel from sleep. "Were you watching me?" I smirked, sipping my coffee. "Maybe. You drool, by the way." He wiped his mouth on the back of his hand, grinning. "That's intimacy right there." I laughed. "You wish." "Actually," he said, suddenly serious, "I think I do." That gave me pause. His eyes were on mine now, and not in the teasing way he often did. This look, it carried weight. Something buried deep and tender, and I felt it land in the space between us. "I didn't mean to invade your trip," he added, "but I needed to be with you somewhere no one could interrupt." I set my coffee down. "Why?" He hesitated, then reached under his bunk and pulled out a book. It wasn't the one from last night. This one was leather-bound, worn at the edges. When he passed it to me, I opened it and saw sketches. Drawings of landscapes, faces, cities.
And me. Dozens of me.
Me laughing in the garden, reading on the porch, driving in the rain. Moments I had no idea were being remembered, let alone captured. "You drew these?" I whispered. He nodded. "Over the years. I didn't know what to do with them, but they felt important." Each sketch was delicate but full of soul. The way he had captured my expressions, the tilt of my mouth, the slope of my shoulders, it was as if he'd studied every version of me I'd forgotten existed. "Why?" I asked again, breathlessly.
"Because I saw you," he said.
"Even when no one else did." His voice was low now, intimate.
"Raw."
"You held everything together for years. You put everyone first. And you gave my dad more than he ever knew how to appreciate." My throat tightened. "I used to think," he continued, "that I looked up to you because you were strong. But the truth is, I looked up to you because you made me feel safe. Safe to feel. Safe to mess up. You were the first woman in my life who ever made me feel like I mattered for more than just potential." I didn't speak. I couldn't. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on knees. "And somewhere along the way, I started to forget what you were to me." I swallowed. "You mean like a second mother?" "No," he said gently. "I mean something more complicated." My heart pounded. The train curved along a ridge, and a sliver of sunlight poured in, cutting across the room and illuminating the fine dust in the air. It felt like we were floating, like nothing else existed but this breathless, shifting now. "Liam," I said softly, "I don't know if this is confusion or—" "It's not confusion," he said. "I've felt it for years. I just didn't know how to name it." I shook my head slowly, caught between caution and a hunger I hadn't let myself feel in decades. "You think you know what this is," I whispered, "but you're young and I'm not confused," he interrupted again, leaning closer. "I've been in love before. I've had flings, dates, all of it. None of them made me feel what I feel when I'm around you." "And what is that?" He held my gaze.
"Seen."
"Like who I am is enough. Like I don't have to become someone else to be loved." Silence. Outside the window, trees passed in flashes. The sun caught on a frozen stream. A hawk circled over a ridge. Inside, the tension between us hummed like a tuning fork pressed to the chest. "I need air," I said finally, rising from the bench. He didn't stop me, but he followed. We walked to the observation car where the glass wrapped around us like a dome, the sky infinite. It was nearly empty, just a young couple in the far corner asleep, and an old man with headphones sketching birds in a notepad. The hush of the train, the gentle sway, made everything feel more fragile. Liam sat beside me without saying a word. After a few minutes, I reached for his hand. It was warm,
Steady.
familiar in a way that terrified me. This trip was supposed to be about moving on, I said quietly. Maybe it still is, he replied, his thumb brushing against mine. Just not in the way you expected. His touch was light, not possessive, not demanding. It asked nothing, just waited. And maybe that's what broke me open. Because for the first time in so long, I realized what I wanted wasn't distance or closure. It was closeness. Not the kind people talk about on greeting cards. The kind that says, I know you, and I want you here, as you are. As I rested my head against his shoulder, the train carved through the cliffs like a secret through stone. And I didn't feel lost anymore. The train continued westward, winding through the amber shoulders of Utah's canyons, golden light flickering against the windows like the last breath of afternoon. Liam and I returned to our roomette just as dusk began to settle, the world outside slipping into its evening hush. Inside, the air was warm and dim. The tiny reading light cast soft shadows on the walls, and the hum of the tracks under our feet had become a part of me now, a rhythm I could feel in my chest. Liam sat on the edge of his bench, elbows on his knees, quiet. I stood by the window, arms crossed loosely over my sweater. Neither of us spoke for a while. And then, gently, he said, Do you ever think about what you wanted your life to look like when you were younger? I turned to him. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't asking lightly. He was inviting me in. All the time, I admitted. But it wasn't a picture, not really. More like a feeling. What kind of feeling? I lowered myself across from him, folding my legs underneath me. I guess I wanted to feel chosen. Not tolerated. Not needed. Just wanted for being me. He looked down, rubbing the back of his neck. That's exactly how I feel around you, he said quietly. I didn't respond right away. The weight of his words pressed into my ribs, soft and heavy. I shouldn't, I whispered. I know, he said. But here we are. The train dipped into a tunnel, and for a moment, everything went dark. Just our silhouettes, the low hum of distance, and the flicker of a new truth between us. When the light returned, something shifted. Liam reached across the narrow space between us, and his fingers brushed my wrist, barely there. A touch that asked nothing. But I didn't pull away. Instead, I turned my hand palm up, offering something wordless. His fingers laced with mine. No rush. No urgency. Just a quiet tether in a world where everything else moved too fast. I think about you more than I should, he said, his voice no louder than the sound of a train. Liam, not just in the way you think, he added. I mean in the quiet, when it's late, when I feel like no one sees me. You're the voice in my head that tells me I'll be okay. I closed my eyes. The ache in my chest was familiar, but now it felt different, like it finally had somewhere to land. I don't know how to let someone that close again, I whispered. You already have. When I opened my eyes, he was closer now, sitting on my bench, our joined hands resting on the space between us. His face was calm, steady. I don't want to make this complicated, I said, even though it already was. It's not complicated, he said. It's honest. My head fell gently against his shoulder. His arm wrapped around me, slow and certain. And there, in the dim golden hour of a moving train, I let myself rest. His cheek pressed against the top of my head. His breath was warm. He smelled like cedar and something familiar, something that had always reminded me of late nights and safety. We stayed like that for a long time, just the sound of rails. And heartbeats. And the truth that neither of us needed to say out loud anymore. Night deepened around us as the train slid through another valley, its windows reflecting our faces back at us like ghosts. The cabin felt too small now, so we drifted to the tiny vestibule between cars, where a narrow window framed the blur of stars. The air here was cooler, scented faintly of metal and dust, the rails clattering softly below our feet. I stood facing the glass, Liam behind me, his arms coming around my shoulders as naturally as if they'd always belonged there. The rocking of the train made us sway together. I could feel his heartbeat against my back, slow and certain, and for a moment everything outside, the past, the names we'd been given, the rules we'd memorized, faded into the sound of wheels on steel. No one else was there. Just the two of us in the in-between space of a moving world. "What happens next when we arrive?" he murmured near my ear. His breath was warm. The question hung between us like a held note, trembling. I closed my eyes. I wanted to answer, but my throat was tight. "We go back to our lives," I said finally, my voice barely audible over the rails. "But maybe we take this moment with us. The truth of it, even if no one else ever knows." His arms tightened slightly, not possessive but protective. "I don't want to lose this," he whispered. "You won't," I said. "What we're feeling, this closeness, it's real. It's ours. But when we step off the train, we have to be careful with it. We have to carry it like a secret, like something fragile and rare." He turned me gently so that we were facing each other, the window behind him streaking with passing lights. His eyes searched mine, not for permission but for understanding. "I've wanted to do this for a long time," he said softly. I didn't move. The world seemed to narrow down to the space between our mouths. And then slowly he bent toward me. It wasn't urgent or reckless. It was hesitant, a question posed in the language of touch. His lips brushed mine once, featherlight. A beginning, not a conquest. For a heartbeat, the train tilted, and the stars outside blurred, and I felt as if we were suspended. Two people between destinations, between names, between the lives we'd been living and whatever came next. When we pulled back, our foreheads rested together, breathing the same quiet air. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing left to say that could make the moment any clearer. The train rolled on, carrying us west, carrying our secret, carrying the fragile possibility of something new. We arrived just after dawn. The Pacific fog hung low over the platform, swirling around our ankles like a final whisper from the journey that had changed everything. The train hissed and sighed, as if reluctant to let us go. Passengers disembarked with a soft shuffle of tired feet, pulling rolling bags, hugging relatives. It all felt muted, like watching a film behind glass. Liam stepped down first, then turned and offered his hand. I took it, letting the last warmth of the train's cabin linger in my fingertips. For a moment, we just stood there, two people who had crossed 1,000 quiet miles together. No titles, no labels, no answers. Just that same question, hanging between us like mist. "What happens now?" I broke the silence first. "There's a coffee shop a few blocks from here," I said. "We can sit, figure out how not to forget what just happened." He nodded slowly, eyes fixed on mine. "Even if we have to pretend we're just traveling companions, we'll know the truth," I said. "That's enough." We walked together in silence. Not close enough to raise eyebrows. Not far enough to feel like strangers. When we reached the cafe, we didn't talk about plans. Or boundaries. Or what the world would say. Instead, we watched the sunrise break over the harbor through the window, our knees brushing under the table. A new kind of quiet settled between us, one that no longer asked for explanation. Because the train had already carried us far enough to know. Some connections don't need permission. They just need space.
And time.
And sometimes a window seat facing west.